but everyone who said we are behind Donald Trump all said, oh, yeah, if Nikki Haley ran against him, if Mike Pence ran against him, we'd certainly consider that.
That was by far the most surprising takeaway of sitting down with this group of voters, because I've listened to probably 50, 60 focus groups of voters around the country, and I've never really seen that shift to looking at the prospect of supporting another candidate for the Republican nomination from voters who identify as strong Trump supporters. I would say that's definitely a fault line that President Trump should be aware of going into the midterms and over the next 2 years as he looks to his reelection.
Yeah, that doesn't usually happen with incumbent presidents in certain parties. But again, these same Trump supporters weren't willing to say that he lied, or they weren't willing to say that he said anything that was racially insensitive. They weren't. I mean, you just go down the list, and they sounded like Trump supporters. They were going to defend him, but you get the real impression it was, yes, we will defend Trump instead of Nancy Pelosi or Hillary Clinton or the mainstream press. But at the same time, you could hear they were Republicans. A lot of them said, you know, one of them said John McCain. Mika did this great word association game. John McCain, hero. Robert Mueller, you know, fact finder. They had positive things to say about a lot of the people that Donald Trump's been critical of. But you know what I saw out of that? I saw at the end of the day Republicans. Republicans who had a chance to beat Hillary Clinton and who don't want Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House.
I think that, I mean, the great primary challenges, you know, Ford and Reagan against Ford, Kennedy against Carter, both set up defeats. It wouldn't stun me to see the same dynamic, because there is, if anything, the divide between the elements of the party is even more profound now. Listening to him, it sounded, and was it like this in the room? It sounds as though they're describing their kid has stolen the neighbor's car, wrecked it, but they still love the kid.
Yeah.
And so you see what I mean?
I did.
It's like, you know, yeah, we know he's, you know, doing drugs, but, you know, he's a good kid, and we're going to get him together.
I asked them about, for example, Stormy Daniels, and it was like the answer we got a couple times over was, I would like my spouse to do that.
Right. So it's.
Yeah, this is the question I wanted to ask. I mean, Joe, you were saying they were Republicans,
right?
And in the context of the conversation, did you get a sense that the well-being of the country was more of a concern than their identity as a Republican?
Well, I can
what Trump was doing.
I can tell you, especially with Pat, the one that kept winking at Mika, saying "bless your heart." With Pat, she believes that America's in trouble, and that Donald Trump is the only one fighting to revive the country. And I know Elise is I don't know if you're a fellow former Republican, but at one point we were both Republicans for most of our lives. The great frustration with Republicans has been, we elect Republican presidents, we knock on doors for them, we have blood, sweat, and tear for these people, we contribute to them, and then they appoint liberal justices. Or then they back down. Then they try to make a deal on immigration with Ted Kennedy. Then they try to make a deal with Ted Kennedy on education. Then they do all of these things that they told us they weren't going to do, because they all tell us they're going to all move the embassy to Jerusalem. They all tell us that. And it all ends up being a lie. And at least what they were saying was, unlike every other Republican president we've elected, this guy is doing exactly what he said he was going to do.
He's delivering on the economy. They like the job numbers, and they like the tax cuts overall. One question at the very beginning of the roundtable was striking, I think, in illustrating kind of how we arrived to this moment. And that was when you were asking the sources of media that everyone listened to or read. And they were talking about how their habits had changed from reading local newspapers to now just watching, you know, strictly, say, Fox. And so I think that it's we have this just cycle of super polarization.
Right.
That if we just insulate and just go further into our own caves
Right.
and don't listen to anyone else, that the